Hello, friends. Welcome to the South Dakota Festival of Books. I'm so glad to have you all here. We have got a ton of people piling in, and we're going to get started. Lorna's waving. She's ready. My name is Thea Miller-Ryan. I am from the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, OLLI, at the University of South Dakota. I am talking to you today from my porch in Sioux Falls, though. I would like to welcome you all on behalf of the South Dakota Humanities Council, which produces the annual Festival of Books. We are so pleased you've joined us for our virtual 2020 event. Before this event gets underway, I'd like to share a few housekeeping details. If you'd like to ask questions or share comments with today's presenter, please type them in the chat section on Zoom, which is usually down at the bottom, and it kind of looks like a little bubble, like a little cartoon bubble. I will pass along as many of those questions and comments as you have as I'm able to at the end of the session. If there's time, we may allow some unmuting and you can ask Lorna questions yourself. Yay! In addition to attending festival presentations like this, we invite you to visit our virtual exhibitors hall, which is on the South Dakota Humanities Council Facebook page, where you can learn more about many authors, publishers, cultural organizations, and you can win prizes. Prizes are always good. You can buy books at our presenting authors at Zandbro's Variety Special Online Festival Bookstore, Zandbros, ZANDBROZ.com. Or for children's books this weekend too, you can buy them from Child's Play Toys, and our partner there is childsplaytoyssf.com. You'll find buttons on the South Dakota Festival, sdbookfestival.com that will take you directly to our booksellers, and we'll also try to include some links in the chat. To help us continue to improve the festival, we'd really appreciate you filling out an evaluation form. We will email you a link at the end of the festival, and you can also find a link in the chat session on Zoom. Finally, you can help keep the festival free by making a tax-deductible donation to the South Dakota Humanities Council. Just visit our website, sdhumanities.org, and click the donate button. This festival would not be possible without generous support of the numerous organizations and individuals who have already donated and are acknowledged on the back cover of our festival guide. You can see my guide. I kind of chew my way through this and I already have a hole in it. No kidding. Not literally. You can also see our sponsors on our website. And now, we are going to go on with the show. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lorna first. All right. I have been fangirling with her for a few minutes already. She is the author of 12 novels, 12, including the best-selling Patty Jane's House of Curl. Loved that book. Angry Housewives Eating Bonbons. Oh, even better. And Oh My Stars, which has been made into a short proof-of-concept film. Her latest book, Chronicles of a Radical Hag, haven't read it yet, can't wait, with recipes, has just been released in paperback. Also an actor, Landvik regularly performs a one-woman, all-improvised show called Party in the Rec Room. Without further ado, I'm going to hand the reins over to Lorna. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Thea. Thank you, everyone who's joined. I have a very iffy computer that was garbling Zoom meetings, so I'm on my phone. And please know that my phone adds about 20 years to my appearance. But just, you know, what can you do? I'm so happy to be here. South Dakota is a neighboring state. I'm in Minneapolis, and their festival, your festival, is just, I think, one of the best in the country. People ask me, how did you get started writing? What made you want to be a writer? And I consider myself really lucky because from the time I learned how to read, and I wasn't a precocious kid, I learned in the first grade, taught by Miss Carlson, who had a flip and cat eye glasses. and I had a crush on her, as you do on all your wonderful teachers. She taught us how to read with the Dick and Jane books, you know, which really weren't the most compelling, you know, see Spot run, see Puff jump. But I thought, yes, yes, I see that. I see Puff jumping and Spot running. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to create compelling stories like that. So that lodged in my mind. I'm going to grow up to be a writer. I did share another career goal for about 3 weeks in the first grade. I really thought I was going to be a professional baton twirler. Even though I never had a baton, I just really liked those boots. So I always read, always wrote. I had a very, very influential teacher in the 6th grade who wrote in my little autograph book, which we used to have back in the 1840s. And he said, best of luck for a fine literary career, because he very much encouraged my writing. He would send my poetry to a radio station that broadcast student work, and just seeing those words from my beloved teacher just gave me that confidence that why not try to have a literary career. So as Thea also mentioned, I've always liked to act. So I did spend my 20s in Hollywood, mostly doing comedy, a lot of stand-up comedies, some improvisational comedy, but my goal really was to segue into movies and take away Meryl Streep's career, but that did not happen. So we moved back to Minneapolis. I joined an improvisational theater company called Dudley Riggs Brave New Workshop. And so I would be on stage at night, but right before we had moved back to Minneapolis, these 2 characters had come into my head. And while I was in Los Angeles in my 20s, I had always written a lot of short fiction, but I didn't feel like I had the depth of knowledge or the gravitas to write that which I always wanted to write, which were novels. But packing up the car to go back to Minneapolis, these 2 women named Patty Jane and Harriet had come into my head, and I had no idea who they were, but they very politely brought this title, Patty Jane's House of Curl, with them. So I thought, well, whatever this is, if it's a long short story, if it's a novel, whatever it is, I think it has something to do with the beauty salon. So when we returned to Minneapolis, and as I said, I got cast in this theater company, I would often come home and just be all wired from being on stage. So I would write late into the night. And I wrote my first novel all by hand, and never knowing what was going to happen next. I'm not an outliner. And for me as a writer, it's very interesting to read about other writers' processes. And I've really come to see that it's about almost an even split, but I would say it's a little more who belong to the pantsers style of writing, which is my style. We write by the seat of our pants, versus the outliners, you know, who know much more in advance what's going to happen. And I always tell any writer, whatever works for you is the way that you write. For me, it's always the appearance in my head of 2 or 3 of the main characters, and they always come fully named. And even though I know their names, I feel I don't know them until I start writing. I'm given just a glimpse of their personalities. This is my latest book, Chronicles of a Radical Hag. And this book is about a long-time newspaper columnist in a fairly small, mid-sized town, fictitious town in Minnesota, who since the early 60s has been writing columns. And she came into my head. Her name was Hayes Evans, as well as the newspaper publisher, Susan McGrath, and her 14-year-old son, Sam. And I thought, okay, well, let's start writing. So I just want to read a little bit of the prologue, and this is really what started the book. Hayes's voice came to me. So she's writing from July 15th, 2016. Minus what that vicious lying mirror tells me, and the knees that crackle like kindling every time I take the stairs, and the ear canals that have muddied with silt of late, 81 feels an awful lot like 29. Okay, maybe 53. You don't stop laughing when you grow old, George Bernard Shaw is credited with saying. You grow old when you stop laughing. If I liked those cutesy pillows cross-stitched with pithy sayings, I'd cross-stitch what Mr. Shaw once said on one, but I don't, so I won't. It's not as if I'll forget something I agree with so completely. Really, I believe laughter is like collagen for the soul. I myself try to have a good laugh at least once a day, although in these trying times we're living through, I wish there were a product, a laughative of sorts, I could take to ensure mirthful regularity. So pretty much right away, I had her sense of voice. I wrote one of her columns. I realized, oh, something happens to her that makes the publisher want to go back and look at her past columns throughout the years. So the reader does get to listen to her voice from, as I said, the early 60s on to the present. The recipes in this book are really good. They're my own, my mother's. I strongly recommend trying the almond crescent cookies. And my baking tip is make them small, because I have had some bookstores and libraries bake some of the recipes from this book when I've appeared there. And they've made them as big as boomerangs. And you want to make your cookies small so you can eat more. Anyway, she writes the recipes just as sort of a gift to readers who might not agree and vocally say so with her opinions. It's sort of to mollify her trolls. Okay, let's put down our boxing gloves, put on some oven mitts, try this recipe. So that has always been the way a book starts for me, with the exception of Angry Housewives Eating Bonbons. And in that book, I was compelled to write it because I had been already visiting so many book clubs. And I thought, I want to write a book about a group of women. And then eventually a man joins who have that common experience of getting together once a month and reading a book. This book, Mayor of the Universe, I had started this book, it would have been my third book. And it's about a mild-mannered actuary who one night wakes up in his childhood bedroom with his Davy Crockett coonskin cap on his bedpost to find his bedroom is filled with aliens. And I thought, what? And that was, I wrote about 50 pages. And my then editor, many years ago, read those 50 pages and she said, Lorna, there seem to be aliens on page 50. I said, I know, I can't believe it. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm really excited. And she said, I don't want you writing about aliens. So I put those 50 pages away in a drawer where throughout the years they'd percolate. And I'd wonder occasionally, I wonder what Fletcher Weschel, he's the main character, I wonder what he's up to. And it happened that I was at the fabulous Prairie Lights bookstore in Pierre, and I learned to say Pierre and not Pierre, South Dakota. And I thought, wow, I am going to go back to Mayor of the Universe, because I had said it in Minneapolis. But being in Pierre, I thought, whoa, if aliens are going to land anywhere, they'd probably land in Pierre. You know, just because of the topography and those miles and miles of scrubby hills. So the next day I took the lay of the land. I walked all over Pierre. I talked to a crop insurance salesman. I went up to the Capitol and I rewrote the beginning of the book and set it in Pierre. And it's a very dear book to me. It's my older brother is a huge reader, and he says this is his favorite of all my books, even though some people think, what, you're not a science fiction writer. But my aliens in this book are really like mild-mannered, but inquisitive in-laws. You know, they just want to make your life better. I was sitting on my porch, which is right in front of me, but you can't see that. Years ago, rocking in a rocking chair and yelling at the neighbor kids to get off my lawn. I'm kidding. When the characters in Oh My Stars came into my head, and the first character was named Violet Mathers, and I knew right away she was from Kentucky. The bulk of her story was set in the Great Depression, and that she suffered a traumatic injury. I didn't know what it was, so I kept rocking. And into my head comes this very charismatic pre-Elvis Elvis of Norwegian heritage named Shell. He's a musician. I thought, whoa, I kept rocking. And then the next person to come into my head was a guy named Austin. And I knew right away that he was an African-American musician. I thought, whoa, how is his story going to blend with theirs in a very segregated time in America? And I thought, well, I'm going to find out. So the real fun for me of writing novels is just the discovery. I try to write as a reader. Okay, what would intrigue me? Am I bored? If I'm bored, I can pretty much guarantee that readers are, you know, other readers are going to be. So for me, right now I'm, knock on wood, there's wood right there. I'm about, I would say, maybe 50 pages away from ending my latest novel, which of course I can't tell you anything about because the CIA has told me I just don't like to talk about my work in progress because it always changes so much. And if ever I talk about it and somebody seems like, oh, well, that doesn't really interest me, then it might, you know, subdue that which I need the most. And that is my confidence that I can get through and complete the story. So when I first wrote my book, and Patty Jane's House of Curl was published in 1995. So that's a long time ago in the literary world. You know, the internet, I didn't even have an email at that time. I did everything that a book that's still published annually, but of course you can find it online, called The Writer's Market, told me what to do as far as finding an agent, how to write a query letter. So I did everything that this book instructed, and I papered Manhattan with, you know, many, 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 many query letters, and got many, 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 many in the mail rejection letters, or sometimes just a little no thank you postcard. But what I am proudest of in my writing career is my perseverance, because I thought, I'm not going to give up until I decide I'm going to give up. So I got about 30 rejections for Patty Jane's House of Curl. And some of the rejection letters were so positive that I would read them and think that they were an acceptance until the last line, which inevitably would be, unfortunately, we don't know what to do with this. And, you know, I would think, well, how about publish it? So then it was published by a very small press, but that small press had a lot of nationwide contacts because the pop of the mom and pop press had been the former publisher of the Wall Street Journal. So he, you know, would call up his many connections around the country. So I think I got far more reviewed because of that. And then the paperback publisher was Ballantine Random House, and so they then became my publishers until Mayor of the Universe, and then I switched to our University of Minnesota Press. So I've had a, well, not a checkered career, I guess it's more a Paisley career. And it's just, I feel so honored and fortunate to be able to have a writing career. And to any of you who are listening who are writers, I'm with you. Keep writing. And again, perseverance is the number one, I think, asset that you can have. So Thea, I'm sorry, I left the H in your name behind. Thea, if anybody has any questions, I would just love to answer some questions.
Great. Well, right now, the only question over here is actually from me.
Oh, okay.
Do you think that Midwest writers have any disadvantages in getting published by a bigger publisher?
I don't. I think that every book is regional. You know, I remember in many bookstores there was always a regional section, and even though I know that, you know, people like to spotlight their particular areas in a bookstore, I thought every book is regional. Every book is set somewhere. You know, it's been really fun when I have traveled outside of the Midwest with my books to hear people ask me questions like, what is hot dish? You know, and I'll have to explain, well, it's somebody very popular in a bar. No, it's a casserole, but it's, you know, that's what we call it, a hot dish. I've had so many people ask me, what does uftameda mean? And, oh, it's, you know, like the Norwegian oive. But I feel as a reader, you know, I'll go anywhere that the writer makes real for me. So I feel my job as a writer is to not alienate people because I'm writing from a place that they may have not visited or have preconceptions about, or anything. My job as a writer is to create the kind of people and living in a place that, oh boy, they want to spend more time with. So I think that's how publishers look at it too. They just think, is this book going to speak to a lot of readers? And I think if the answer is yes, then, you know, that's a green light for the publisher.
All right, we do have more questions coming in.
Oh, goody, goody.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't know if you can see the picture in the background. That's one of my daughter's kindergarten pictures. You know, I know some writers have such good Zoom positions with big desks and, you know, very learned looking bookshelves. And I wouldn't want you to look at my bookshelf because it's so crammed with all sorts of stuff, and it looks like there's no order there, and there is, but only I understand it. So I tried to get a more placid background.
Well, let's see. With a zillion publishers out there, how did you choose which ones to send query letters to?
That is a very good question. Again, things have changed so much. So initially when I did, the first step as far as fiction goes is you have to get an agent. It used to be that publishers would accept things over the transom, you know, unsolicited, but nowadays you really do need an agent. So my first step was trying to get an agent. And I don't know if you as a reader will read a book's acknowledgments, but that's always a fun part of reading for me. And often a writer will acknowledge her agent. So I can say that, you know, books I really enjoyed, I would take note of who that writer's agent was. Agents are also listed now online, and you can see who they represent, and you can see, oh, that book is, you know, similar in tone to mine. This publisher might like it. So then you have to craft that very compelling query letter, and don't make it long. You know, I guess agents can't turn a page, but for everything, you know, you just want a concise one-page letter telling a tiny bit about yourself and just trying to make your book as compelling and as inviting as possible, so that when the agent finishes reading, yeah, I want to see a partial manuscript, I want to see the whole manuscript. So right now I would say to go online, and you can just type in lists of agencies, Sometimes children's book writers will accept manuscripts over the transom, but I think they're few and far between. And I think your first step absolutely has to be finding that agent. And if you're a mystery writer, you can look at some of your favorite writers, agents. If you're writing in other kinds of genres, you can find one similar to yours. So you have to do a little bit of homework. I also was a big reader of Publishers Weekly, which is a weekly, I guess it wouldn't be put out every month if they called it Publishers Weekly, but they also, you can read so much by just reading their book reviews or, the business side of the industry. And and now a lot of people are self-publishing too. And I did try that initially with Mayor of the Universe, and it was brutal. You have to be a real salesperson. And I was raised by, Lutheran, Norwegian heritaged parents, and especially my paternal grandmother's words were always drummed into my head, don't toot your own horn, don't toot it, like, Grandma, what's a horn for? But I've learned that lesson, and it's very hard for me to self-promote, and in the old days, you used to have your publisher and your publicist do that for you, and now it's more your job. And so I do have an author Facebook page, but I'm just so bad at just putting myself out there. And I would really, if any of you care to write an answer in the chat, which I can't see, but Thea might tell me, I would like to know, as readers, how important you think a writer's social media status should be. Do you think it's really important? Do you not care? So that's a little side homework for you if you want.
Sounds good. Lots of questions about agents. So you said you got yours, the writers, what was it called? Writers Almanac that used to come out every year?
It's published every
Writers
year.
Market, yes.
The Writers Market.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you got yours by sending a query letter. Have you had the same agent the whole time?
No. My first agent retired and moved to Australia. And then I went to New York, and I had a very, very fun couple days interviewing about 7 different agents. And I'll never forget, I met this one for lunch at the, I think it was the Peninsula Hotel, some really fancy hotel. And I was so excited. And I, of course, used the bathroom ahead of time, to check my teeth and all that. And it was such a fancy bathroom. They had, hand lotion dispensers. And I thought, wow. And I depressed the hand lotion button, and it projectile squirted hand lotion all over the sleeve of my, what I thought was very snazzy blazer. So of course I'm trying to wash it all off, and I just have a big, huge wet sleeve, and I go out to meet her, and I tell her the story, and she says, well, why don't you take it off? Because they do have a laundry service here. We'll just give it to the concierge, and they can, fix it while we're lunching. And inside I just crumbled. I thought, no, because like a lot of women, or at least I think a lot of women, when we wear blazers, you don't really care what you wear underneath. Because I did have a big scarf, and underneath I had this old ratty t-shirt that had, fraying cap sleeves and might have had a couple BO stains. And so I didn't go with that agent. But yeah, I've actually had 3 different agents. So.
All right. Well, I know I'm not the only one sitting here giggling about this. We have people commenting that they think you're really funny, and they really like the voices that you do.
Thank you so much. Oh, occasionally I'll see a little thing down below, and somebody just said that they were listening to Chronicles of a Radical Hag. And I did get to record that on tape. And it was so much fun because I got to go to LA and be in a sound studio, and you have your headphones on, and the sound engineer happened to be from Minnesota. So he and I got along very well. But I did find that, anytime I would make a mistake in reading, and, I would say, oh, sorry, I was apologizing all the time. And at the end of the day, I asked, and then he'd have to wait and go, okay, let's go back, to that sentence. So at the end of the day, I said, did I tend to say sorry a lot? He goes, yeah. And I said, a lot more than most writers? He goes, yeah. I said, do male writers apologize like that? No. And so I made it in the next couple of days. It was my goal not to say I was sorry, but just stop. And then I would go back and read, so he wouldn't have to keep coming on the air. Okay, again. And we were so thrilled. My last day of recording, I think I only had 3 sorries. So I'll learn.
That had to be hard for a Midwesterner.
Can I make you a pie instead?
Yeah, exactly. We have another question. When you're writing, do you have a daily or weekly word count you like to get to, or do you only write when the inspiration strikes?
Another good question. I think you can't wait until inspiration strikes, or you might be waiting for weeks or months or years. And my goal really is to write every day. Do I meet that goal every day? No, but I really try hard. And sometimes that goal is only met for 20 minutes. And sometimes I'm writing late into the night. When I wrote Patty Jane's House of Curl, I think I might have mentioned I wrote the first draft all by hand. And I had a notebook, and I would keep track of the pages I wrote every day. And I had found that a while ago, that, page track notation. And I thought, wow, because one day I had written that 20 pages written. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I wrote it by hand. So I'm sure some days I wrote really big. I think it can be very helpful to keep a word count track. I think a lot of writers do that, but it's something I often forget, or I shouldn't say sometimes, I do often forget to keep track of it. And it's something, you can check off if you do have a daily goal. But again, for me, when I write and consider myself my own boss, I think I'm a very lenient boss. If I'm cracking a whip, it's it's a very tender whip. But sometimes I would like to, get a little, get back to work. So yeah, we're always evolving. So I'm trying to evolve into an absolute daily writer instead of most always a daily writer. But still I can't, I have friends who set their coffee maker to go off at 5:30 in the morning, and then they're at their desks writing with that cup of coffee. But, I'm not a morning person at all. And when I do get up, I got to read the papers and do the crossword puzzles, and, they get harder as the week goes on. So it takes more time. Then I got to walk the dog. But so people often say mornings are the best to write, but you have to figure out for yourself what's the best, what works best in my life. And sometimes I am a very, very late night writer, although most often it's in the afternoons that I'm working. So.
Interesting. Well, another one of your fans here wants to know, what do you have on your bookshelf? What writers are you reading right now?
Oh, when the lockdown first started, or I shouldn't say lockdown, but when we were encouraged to quarantine, I don't, that's another reason why I don't want to show you my bookshelves, because they're so crammed and messy. But often the wonderment of that is I'll find a book that I've never read. What? I didn't know I had this. So like in March, I found a book by James Michener. And I had read he wrote a book called The Novel, which I read years ago because it was about a writer and I was very interested. But I hadn't read his really big, thick tomes. And this one wasn't very thick. It was about an assisted living facility in Florida. It was called Recessional. And I enjoyed it for not necessarily the language, and I do love to read for a writer's voice. But I also am intrigued by, other modes of writing. And you'll learn about geography, history, all sorts of things. And so the next book I read of his was Chesapeake Bay, which starts in the 1600s or 1500s and goes to fairly present times. And I feel like now I could, offer tours through the Chesapeake Bay because I learned so much. Right now I'm reading Louise Erdrich's The Night Watchman, which is wonderful. I'm also reading, I get asked a lot what I read, so I wanted to write another book that I just got out of the library. It's called Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments by Sadiya Hartman, and it's a stories about urban Black women in the early 20th century and the lives of strength that they led. A book by Ruth Hogan, the something of lost things. Oh, I should have written that one down because sometimes titles elude me. I guess I should have written down more books that I'm reading. But any good, compelling piece of fiction. Sorry, I just remembered. I just finished a book called A Little Light by Lori Lanson. She's an LL writer, so you gotta like her. And it's kind of a dystopian novel, very handmaidenish. And it's the main character is a 16-year-old girl. And I just finished that. I have been reading through this time a lot more thrillers than I usually read. And I don't know if it's just to totally escape the world that we're living in now or what. But, and even as much as I enjoy thrillers, I have to say a really good, like a literary novel, they're the ones that are going to stick in my head and make me really think and wonder later about things. I like books that make me want to ask questions and wonder and have that afterlife of thought.
Well, I'm skipping around on the question section right now because there's one that really relates to that. Adam says, do you suggest reading books of different genres or read books that are similar genres to what you are writing?
That is a good question. For me, and that might differ for you, Adam, as a writer, but for me as a writer, sometimes when I'm deep in a book, I will find myself reading less because I don't want anything to intrude upon the story I'm going to tell. And that'll make me really nervous because I always like to be reading. But I think you can read genres outside your own as long as those genres are offering you stories that you really want to be involved in. And so, sometimes I don't like the defining genre terminology, because I think, okay, if it's a Western, it's going to be a certain way. But, Lonesome Dove certainly was a book that, took me out of my preconceptions of what a Western should be. Or, McDonald's, Travis McGee, I think he is a really good language artist. I love the way he puts sentences together. I haven't read all of Stephen King's books. I mean, you'd have to be a speed reader. But the ones I've read of him, I've really enjoyed, not so much because I'm a horror enthusiast, but because I appreciate his use of language very much. And he writes, you know, stories that make you look under the bed when you go to sleep. So yeah, I think it can never hurt to be really widely read. Although, and I like to read a lot of nonfiction too, but my wide reading aspirations don't jump into books about astrophysics or something that I would just sit there and, what? Huh, I don't get it. I want that book, even if it's challenging, I want to be able to understand it, I guess.
So along that same line, Katie has a question. She said, often I'm told that a novel needs to fit a clear genre, like YA, women's literature, historical fiction, etc., in order to be more attractive to agents or publishers. My novel doesn't fall under one particular genre. It's a mixture of historical fiction and speculative fiction. So will I have trouble getting it published?
I don't think so. I think anybody can ask that question. It's not that the book has to fit into a particular genre. It's that the book, in whatever genre it is, has to make readers wonder what's going to happen next. So in your query letter, you can explain that it's, a mixture of historical and speculative fiction, but how else are you going to intrigue that agent? By, posing a question. What would you do if Mary Todd Lincoln got on board with Tesla to the first visit to Mars? You have to make a real intriguing premise because, people love rule breakers too. And if you successfully break rules in your book, oh, wow, we got a whole new genre here. It's historical / speculative fiction. So one thing that I'm also glad, and for me, it was only writing. In my acting career, I took the opinions of other people too seriously, and I didn't fight hard enough for what I wanted. But in writing, I thought, really, I'm the one who's going to decide when I've solicited enough people, when enough people have said no. I'm not going to let anyone else do that. So you have to, just turn off the noise of what publishers are looking for or what agents may or may not look for, and just write the most compelling book you can, and then the most compelling query letter. And no matter how many no's you get, just keep sending it out. And then if you're getting a lot of no's, like, well, I didn't like this or that, because when I got agent no's, okay. When I got publisher no's, saying I didn't like this or that, okay, but I wasn't about to change things until a publisher actually said, okay, we want to buy your book. And then I thought, okay, now I'll listen to what you want to change, because you have invested, the money, time, and effort, whereas anyone can say, oh, I didn't like this. I might like it more if you did this. But again, everything I say can have a caveat. If you're sending to a lot of agents and they're saying the same thing, then rework your query letter, like, okay, they didn't like this or that, and take a consensus. And then that agent will really guide you as to what the publishers are saying, and okay, maybe I need to rethink this or that. But you have to be your own strongest advocate, not just from the start, but throughout your career.
Great.
So good.
just have time for a few other questions. I've got one question that takes a big U-turn, and then quite a few comments on your social media question. The U-turn one is from Diane, and she said, where do you perform your one-woman show when conditions allow? And is the Dudley Riggs Improv Group still in existence?
Well, thank you for that question. There's a fabulous theater in Minneapolis called the Bryant Lake Bowl. And when I was in high school, the Bryant Lake Bowl was kind of a seedy bowling alley bar. And then they had a game room where people, not me, would buy pot. And later it was bought and revitalized. So it is still that very old-fashioned, old-school bowling alley, a bar restaurant, but that has really good food and craft beers and stuff. I mean, really good food. And then that game room was turned into an 80-seat theater. And I started performing at in that theater with a lot of improvisation groups, and finally decided, what would it be like to do improv on my very own without anyone to riff off of? And so I've been doing that show for years, every month, every weekend in January. And I just, I did it last January, and I always after I end the show, I always run upstairs to say goodbye to people who come and, shake hands, hug. And I thought, whoa, am I ever going to be able to do that again? The theater is, people are like 10 feet away from me on the stage in the front row, and, sometimes spittle will fly. So I think I'm just worried about the fate of theaters. Dudley Riggs' Brave New Workshop is still running. He sold it. In fact, he just died about a week and a half ago at age 88. He sold the theater to a couple who's been doing a great job, and they moved the theater to downtown Minneapolis. But yes, the Brave New Workshop is still, well, not in COVID times, but it's a theater still up and running. Yep. And thank you. I don't know what's going to happen this January, and I know everybody always loves to come to Minnesota in January, and but if you ever do, and if it's still open, please come and see me, because I make margaritas on stage.
Wow, that's quite a show.
Well, party in the rec room. You got to have margaritas in the rec room.
That's right. Some people have made some comments on the social media, your social media question. One says, I don't care about an author's social media presence. Another one says, you should always have social media and connect your book sales through it, free advertising. And then you might know Sherry. She said, I see authors' social media pages as important for knowledge of new releases and live appearances. COVID and watching The Social Dilemma could change influence of social media or change ways of using it. That's good. Social media is a strange creature. You have a right to privacy about your private life, but if someone takes an interest in you, that might be more apt. They might be more apt to take or to buy your books. There should be a fine line of moderation, though. So I guess you got the whole gamut there.
Yes, and I think that's my real struggle, because I don't like to write about my private life. I have children and a husband, and I think why, their lives are their lives. I will, and my daughters have even told me, "Ma, we don't care." But I just think, nah, this is just. Like I said, I was raised Lutheran, and I don't know. I'm a Luddite, so what a combo! Bam, bam, bam. But that's very good to try to find that fine line between, hey, I'm excited about this book. I really want you to read it, and you don't need to know if my weight is higher than my IQ.
I just remembered I learned that word Luddite from you. I heard
you did?
Yes, I heard you say it at the 2004 book festival, and I I remember going home and having to look it up, and yeah, it was great.
Well,
So
that's really embarrassing that I said it in 2004 and I'm still saying it. I should be past that. So,
it's an accurate description of many, believe me. Well, we are through all of the questions on the side. Um, Thank you so much. I am so honored to be the person who gets to talk to you during this special time, and I look forward to seeing you at other festival events.
I look forward to it too, Thea. We do have a couple minutes. Could I read one more thing?
Everyone would love that. Yes.
Okay, because this is the South Dakota Book Festival. I do want to read just the first page of Mayor of the Universe. Okay. Remember, I'm not Isaac Asimov, but there are aliens in this book. Okay. In the desolation of a South Dakota field whose shorn wheat stubble poked through a lather of new snow, a boy in a maroon corduroy jacket danced. A bitter wind snatched at the music playing on the transistor radio held in his mittened hand, but still the boy shook his shoulders and swiveled his hips, a trillion stars his nightclub ceiling, the full moon his spotlight. Ladies, ladies, please, no fighting, he said, his boots raising tiny white clouds. You'll all get your chance. With studied cool, he flicked up his matted fake shearling collar and jumped into the air, bouncing to the ground in a half split. He was James Brown, urging his hordes of fans to tighten up, while his furious footwork generated heat that scorched the snow. He was Elvis Presley, whose teasing pelvic thrusts and wobbly knees caused multiple swooning. His mitten rode up and he saw the face of his watch glint in the moonlight. He was Fletcher Weschel, and he was late. Ladies, please, he exclaimed, batting away the keys and underpants and love notes thrown to him as he raced towards the Ford Galaxy he had just that day been licensed to drive. Before opening the door of the idling car, he tipped the brim of his plaid wool hat and pointed to a lovely redhead. Now you, Anne Margaret, I'll see you in Vegas. Even though the roads were empty in all directions, he turned on his blinker to indicate his merge into traffic and cautiously steered the car back toward town, where there had once been music and dancing and adoration and sexual conquest. There was now only the wind blowing across a winter wheat field, and underneath its cold whistle, laughter. Now that's supposed to make you wonder, oh, who's laughing? But I wish I could be there in person. I always love driving down, is it 90 to Sioux Falls? And yeah, what a world. Let's hope next year we're all gonna be sitting nose to nose and just reveling in this world. But thank goodness we all have books that we can read and that can transport us to places we can't go to right now.
That's the truth. Thank you so much. And
you are
thank
so
you
welcome.
everyone. Thank you everyone for watching and listening today. And we will see you again soon. Thank you, Lorna, and have a great rest of the festival.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Arrivederci. Ciao. Adieu. Bienvenidos. Guten Tag.
Right. Take care.
Bye-bye.